Hi, Todd.
Hello, Miles.
I like you. I'm happy that you're here.
I'm happy to be here.
Will you do me the honor of telling me how you came to be a session musician, please?
Yes, I will do that honor. Moved to Nashville in 2006. I was living in St. Augustine, Florida, giving guitar lessons, writing songs, starting to record myself. I had a friend who was a musician, a drummer, David Johnson, who was here in the 90s and was really busy at that time. We were in a band together and he said, man, just go. Just go. Try it out. I had a friend who I had ran into a few different times who synchronicity happened and he said, come stay at my house for a week. And I moved 6 months later.
How old were you at the time?
23.
Okay.
22 when I visited, 23 when I moved.
Did you do the college thing for music or anything?
Nope. Just hung out with people who did. My guitar teacher in high school was like a kind of a big influence for me. He turned me on to a lot of cool music. North Florida was this sort of hotbed for Americana and folk music. So I was like learning about bluegrass and then learning about jazz all at a similar time. And that combined with the music my parents brought me up on, it's kind of how I ended up. And I just love recording. I've always loved it. Since I was little, I would record with my little keyboard and do MIDI and, wow, look, you can do 2 tracks and then they go together. And that has always been magical for me. So
what were your goals in coming to Nashville?
So I moved here and I was, I'm going to be a session musician. I'm going to do this.
That was it.
That was the goal. But quickly I realized that's not going to happen right off.
Right.
And I was still writing songs and still vocal and instrumental songs. And I started recording demos for people. I had my setup and I knew how to do basic Pro Tools out of my little apartment on Music Row. And I just met songwriters and started recording their demos. And
how do you feel like you met the majority of those sort of earlier demo clients? Were you going to rounds and things? Were you intentionally putting yourself into places where you would encounter those people, or was it just from playing in bands? Or how do you think a lot of that came your way?
I'm trying to think about the first demos that I did. I remember Kacey Timmer, Matt Rogers, those guys, but I don't remember how we ran into each other.
But it wasn't like you were putting up signs on your car.
I've never really advertised. Yeah. No, I think people would hear a demo and they'd be like, oh, okay, I like that acoustic and that Mando.
So did it also, were there situations where you were writing and doing the demo, where you were the track guy basically?
Not until much later on.
Okay.
The track guy thing came 2010. I feel like that started happening more. Coming from the acoustic world, I was reluctant to be like this sort of layery, big production sort of guy, but I definitely did a lot of those demos, copying FGL,
right,
trying to get that sound, with samples and programming. And
so wait, acoustic guitar, has that always been the focus, or did you start out?
No, I started just out just as much on electric guitar.
Okay.
But I wanted to be Mark Knopfler.
Right.
It's not like I was like, I only want to be Michael Hedges or I only want to be Tony Rice. I played a lot of electric guitar and sort of had split brain about what I was going to do. But I feel like the idea of being an acoustic session player was more exciting to me.
Said nobody but you, but I love that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I think Brian Sutton said that.
But Brian Sutton.
Yeah, Brian, please go back out on tour so I can do some more.
Yeah, there's a few guys that I wish had some sort of bizarre fungal malady on their hands or.
Absolutely love Brian, and I'm a big fan of Russ Barenberg, he's also a big fan of, and I learned that through Russ because when Brian was very young, him and Russ were friends and played together a lot, and he remembers Brian came here with that goal. I'm going to be a session player, and probably in mind, I'm going to be like the greatest acoustic session player of the next decade.
When I met you, I was in the middle of doing my climb the ladder, session grind,
Yeah.
say yes to everything.
Yeah.
When I met you, it was always on the cool things that I was like looking forward to on my calendar. You were never on the things that I wasn't as much looking forward to on the calendar. But when your version of that daily grind that I was going through was doing a lot of it at home.
Yeah.
And building demos on your own.
Yeah. And that's what prevented me from having to do that.
Right.
And I'm sure in some ways it took away from some of the cool stuff that I would have done. Some of the songwriters and producers. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it was by design that I was like, okay, if I can make my nut doing this, then I'm not going to kill myself tracking.
But I would assume that some of the advantages of that are thinking more like a producer because you're covering more ground in terms of instruments and chairs that you're having to sit in. Is doing that what got you more into the production stuff? Or obviously you've always loved doing recording and producing, but
yes.
Did it at least help get you clients out of?
Well, it happened really organically. Several demos that I've made as demos became, records, and that's like, okay. And so these songs have, 90 million streams. They were a demo, at one point. And certain songs you say, okay. Or certain clients, you're like, okay, this guy's a songwriter, but he's also an artist. This is a great song. Maybe I'll spend 5 times as much time on this.
Conservatively
speaking, and you sort of like pick which ones, but doing demos it helps with so many different skill sets. But that can also be sort of a little bit of a curse because if you're a jack of all trades.
Have you specifically avoided being perceived as a jack of all trades? Because there are a lot of guys that have come from a similar background where they're primarily doing stuff at home, playing all of the instruments, and then they're coming in and nobody really knows where to fit them, and they don't really know where to fit, and so they end up going into several different chairs. And I've seen that sort of dilute potentially some people's perceptions on certain instruments because they're not crushing it on one. What have you done to avoid that, or have you had to avoid that at all?
I haven't intentionally tried to avoid it. If anything, I've tried to sort of shine a light on it.
Great.
Because you have to now to make a living. You have to be able to do all these things. Luckily, I've been able to, I still get calls and I still get to produce. And that feels like a blessing to me because there's so many people who have just grinded so hard to get where they are as a session musician or as a producer. So if I can do either of those in any professional capacity, I feel like I've accomplished something.
Right. How do you balance that? Because I find it difficult even balancing saying that, I'm leaning into working more from home versus being in the conventional studio circuit. Do you have to worry about the perception?
No, I think it's just scheduling and it's just basically like if I get a call for a master, I'll take a master. I'll book things around that just to make sure that people still understand I'm available. And that is definitely a thing I want to still do.
So because I love doing it. That.
Yeah, I love doing it. And then when I'm not getting calls, I can do these other 4 things. I can produce instrumental music for myself. I have songwriter friends that I can make records with. And I have artists that want to work with me, either in the beginning or in like the middle of their career, So it's like, okay, let's make something great together.
Jumping back and forth between the session thing and working from home and also songwriting and producing, do you feel like those things kind of feed each other?
Understanding songwriting structure and being inside writing a song and the phrasing of a melody and understanding that and having, sort of roots in that, I feel like can only help when you're in the chair trying to add to someone else's song, and we're all producing. We're all just producing ourselves. We're all producing the track, and everybody's getting really good at that. Like our generation is like, because we're doing both. Most people are doing both. Yeah. They're at home without a producer's input, or they're also producing other people and writing with other people.
Yep.
And they're working at studios.
in terms of the other stuff, producing and working on records with other songwriters, a lot of that stuff is putting out things for the future. Right?
Investing, yeah.
Yes. And is that kind of the balance that you're trying to maintain as far as making the money, earning the living, also being available, but at the same time, try and grow something for later?
Yeah, that's really that's best case scenario, when you can still be getting a paycheck for your work and then also being able to do work that will pay you later.
Yeah.
I mean,
and that you might even enjoy a little.
yeah,
or
exactly.
a lot, hopefully.
And that also brings me to the idea of enjoying what you're doing, regardless if it's a session call or not. I mean, I made a conscious decision before the pandemic that I would make sure I'm having fun on every session I do. I make sure I'm enjoying myself, and it's easy to do with the group of musicians that we have because everybody's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Everybody gets along pretty good. And producers are pretty cool in this town. The biggest struggles are personal struggles on sessions. I feel like at this point, it's I don't feel like I'm doing a good enough job internally. How do I figure this out? How do I get through this?
What are some of the things that you work on, or that you've noticed that you need to work on, or that you've amended and fixed? And
finding your slot.
Right.
For me especially, the sonic range that I live in as an acoustic musician, rhythmically where I live, what I'm adding, and arrangement wise where I live, understanding that and being able to quickly get there, that's a muscle that is so important. Depending on my comfort level at the time, on the moment, maybe it's the tempo of the song, or maybe it's, the pace of the production, or my comfort level with the producer, I will take more chances. And I'm always conscious of, am I making this decision for the song, or am I making this decision because it's something I know I could execute?
Right.
And for me, my style is based on how easy is this to execute, really, because with acoustic guitar, the sound of the open strings, the sound of it feeling easy to execute is that's the basis of my style. There's things that I do that might not sound easy, but they are easy to me now at this point, and they fit into the ethos.
You mentioned your style. Obviously, we all know that we have to be pretty flexible. I at least feel like I'm putting on different hats for different situations.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I get in that situation wearing a certain hat and I go, oops.
Right.
Just kidding.
Exactly.
Do you find that to be more or less difficult in the acoustic chair, knowing about other instruments? And
I feel like for a lot of the pop country world and country sessions, there's a specific role for the acoustic guitar.
Right.
And it's pretty specific. You can't really step out of it too much.
Right.
And then there's all the other stuff that's not that, where you have a lot more sort of the space that you take up in a track is much different, for more Americana or folk leaning things. There'll be times when I'll go onto a session expecting it to be really pop country and have my shoulders in that place ready to do the thing, and they want it to be something a little bit left leaning, and that's always cool too.
I'm often getting too excited when they are allowing me to lean left, and I do too much. Have you had a hard time finding that balance? Because I still suck at it.
The drum chair is such an interesting chair on pop country sessions, because I feel like you sort of get policed the most out of most of the sessions that I do.
This is validation. I love it. Keep going.
But I mean, it is besides the vocal, it's the loudest thing, and then electric guitar, and then everybody else. You have a little bit more of you go this way or you can go this way. And it really sort of gives it that type of pop country stamp a little bit more audibly to the listener. And maybe that's why I don't run into that as much.
So you're saying I suck at my job because my job is harder than your job.
I'm just saying your job is harder than mine. You said that you suck.
I did. As soon as you think you've got it nailed, you meet somebody that wants it totally different.
And that's another thing, man. Sessions, I still have that bit of, I have no idea what might happen today. And I think that's important for me to have that sort of little bit of not perfect clarity of what's going to happen, because it'll always be sort of different than what you expect. And really it's based on how much attention I'll be given during the session.
Right.
There are a lot of sessions where you're just self-policing. You're producing yourself. You're not getting any feedback and you're producing yourself. And I mean, it depends on the producer. Some producers are getting really in on everybody's parts.
Right. Some people obviously know you from Golden Hour and songs like Slow Burn, but they may not know things like you played on the Morgan Wallen song, You Proof. Yeah. Talk to me about the difference, and I bet the difference in the tracking process in those two songs and those two camps is pretty wild.
Pretty wildly different.
Yeah.
The Kacey situation, we were sort of like set up for a week recording 2 songs a day.
Okay.
Which is the same pace actually as the Joey Moore productions. Similar in that way. And similar in the sense where we just played the song over and over again. With Slow Burn, I was able to take Daniel's part and meld it into my own and then create something with a second guitar part. With You Proof, it was more like Charlie Handsome had created a demo that was great. Like his performance of this exact part on the demo could have been the record.
Were you hoping that it would be?
No, in this case, I was hoping that I could beat it.
Yay!
And I just played that exact, I think it's 2 or 4 bar part for almost 3 hours. Not the same sort of vibe,
Right.
Slow Burn was this sort of like, organic feeling, textural thing that I sort of felt like it had much more of my fingerprint on it. But they were similar in the sense that there were both other people's parts that I sort of took on. One I had to execute exactly like the person who created it, and the other one I was able to sort of move around and sort of make my own a bit.
Are there ways that you're still creatively fulfilled, even though those two experiences are vastly different from each other?
The Tashin part and Slow Burn, and obviously is a little bit more fulfilling just from a soul place,
right.
But this isn't about feeding your soul. It's about making the artist happy and making the producer happy. So for You Proof, to get inside that, it was basically like, play this and get inside it, get inside this specific thing that I'm supposed to execute. Use a cool instrument. Like I used my resonator instead of using an acoustic guitar.
Right.
I was like, okay, I even like switched. I went to like Elia position to perform it. And that,
do other guitar players call it the Elia position?
I mean, that he's one of the only ones that uses the classical position, right?
Yeah, I guess I haven't really paid attention.
Yeah. So, and I did that yesterday too on a track. It's like, okay. Just like certain finger style stuff out here is just like, it's not great. It's much more comfortable for your whole body, for blood flow and everything, and the musculature to get into this position. He figured that out early.
Your approach when you lead sessions is slightly different than others, and I only mean in a lot of us have gotten so used to doing those get it in and get it done sessions, just like bare teeth and and there's a lot of psychology involved in that. You're telling someone, yes, this piece of music means a lot to us as it does you, and we want to do it justice. And we know that this is your art. You're planning on your kid's college fund with this, but you've got 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So yeah, we care, but only this much.
Yeah. Pick your battles.
And so there's kind of an art to that of managing the client, managing the song, and managing the process. And I feel like a lot of times I spend more time on that, on the politics and the psychology and the pacing, rather than truly exploring musical ideas.
Yeah.
For the sake of exploring musical ideas.
How far do you push in the first 10 or 15 minutes of playing the song to do something unique or do something that works? We all can get something that's like works immediately We've been trained to do that. Really, it's sort of how much are we pushing?
Yeah.
What's the producer want? Is there a producer? Do they have feedback?
Right.
Do they know what they want? How much are we telling them what they want? Right? So all of those things kind of play into the dynamic of how quickly I come up with something that works, or how far I push into making something that maybe is original, but
I walked into a session once, and this is something that we've heard, I'm sure now through the years, but I remember the first time I heard it. And it was a songwriter demo thing, and somebody asked, hey, what's a reference for this? As we're about to walk
Great
out
question.
on the floor. And
Great
he
question.
said, just make it sound like part of the problem. And I was like, I know exactly what that means. We want it to be middle of the road, mainstream.
Right. And that's like, how does that make you feel?
I love that.
Yes. It's comforting.
Yes. But the more input, the better.
Yeah.
Assuming that the expectation is still that I get to take that input and present what I think it is.
Right. It's great to have a roadmap.
There is that line where it goes from roadmap to handcuffs.
Yes.
And I feel like that probably happens to you more often than it does.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like the acoustic roll it's pretty thin.
Right.
So like finding the joy in that, finding your little place, there's an art to that.
I would assume that a lot of that starts to come into play with like instrument selection. Pop country, 85 BPM.
Yeah.
How many guitars do you have for that? For the middle of the road thing?
Yeah, I basically have one guitar, my J45, that is that center beam. It's like the middle of the road.
Yep.
And it works for a lot of things. And then I have sort of like my J50 that's dead strings, a little bit bigger sound. That's like, maybe that could be a little bit more rockin', a little bit more indie country feeling. Mm-hmm. And then I've got my little Gill guitar that's like, okay, this is way, way off in like singer-songwriter world. It's not going to be the big strumming box.
Right.
And then really like some of the greatest guitars I've ever played on sessions didn't belong to me.
Like you stole them?
I stole them. Yeah. Okay. I stole them from people. And
do we have a legal issue here, or should?
No, I gave them back. But,
okay.
After
We're
the
good.
Sessions.
No. Don't call him. We're good.
He's not talking to anyone right now. There's no one there.
Have you done session work on many other instruments that you're capable of doing in the conventional session sense?
There was one situation where Lawrence Rothman called me in and he's like, yeah, we're going to do a Vince Gill song and a couple other songs. And then I get there and Vince Gill is there and he's got his acoustic guitar and I have to play the solo to that song while he's in the control room. You couldn't have made this shit up. Like, I'd be playing an electric guitar solo on a Vince Gill song while Vince is in the other room listening. That's not ever going to happen.
How'd it go? I mean, obviously it went well, but...
It went great. And then we got to play a couple where I played acoustic and he was playing acoustic. And
did he say anything that made you uncomfortable? Or like, did he offer any help that you were like, oh God, Vince hates my playing?
There was a bar in the solo where I was like, man, what do you think about that? He's like, I think it's cool. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. On all the Kacey stuff, I'd also bring an electric rig. And
are there certain producers like Ian that kind of ask you just, hey, bring some stuff. Let's camp out and experiment with things. And
often
is that the attitude?
Yeah, often we're in a place where there's already like an electric setup, and like you can just plug in, and then if either Conrad Snyder is like sort of like getting sounds while you're playing, or you're in a place like when we made Golden Hour, we were at Sheryl Crow's studio for most of it.
Oh wow!
So like she has every electric guitar, almost every acoustic guitar. Like Slow Burn is one of her acoustics. It's her Texan. There's other songs where I played her Telly and
playing all those instruments. You don't like write them down and be like, okay, when I see this on Reverb, I have to buy it.
There is. I've been searching for that specific year Epiphone Texan since then. I just don't want to buy one off Reverb. I want to play one, but like,
right.
They're at Gruen. They're like, okay, we'll call you when it comes in, or you check Carter. And I bought a 67 Texan, and it's not the right nut width to get specific.
Do you kind of have a recording set up at home that you're just kind of good with, or is that something that you are also?
I could spend more money on gear. I'm not that guy who's like always buying new shit. Like I like my studio setup is pretty modest. You know, I've got a couple great preamps. I've got a little, you know, console for tracking drums, an old Yamaha PM1000. I geek out more about microphones.
Right.
Because I feel like I have a lot of the voices that I want.
What do you use as your main mic or main mics rather at home?
I use a Gefell MV692, which is like a Microtech Gefell, like a vintage German pencil mic with a M70 capsule. It's a nickel capsule. So it's like kind of like a KM84.
Okay.
But a little bit bigger, and they're only like $800. And then a Coles.
Yeah.
You know, 4038. Yeah. And then I go into two Neve AMS Neve 1081s and just tweak them there. And then I go into console and I use the compressors, the 1176 compressor inside console.
And are you printing through console into Pro Tools?
Yeah.
Man, that console stuff is... Have you shot out a lot of the Unison pre's versus the pre's that you have?
No, I haven't, but I do have 4 Unison pre's on my X8.
I would urge you just to try it.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you grab the demos of all the...
Yeah.
Of all the Unison pre-channel strips. Because, man, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I mean, Jakir, he's like way in that stuff. And I did a session at his house and he's like, we're not going to use any preamps. We're just going to pick I'm going to cycle through all these preamps and find the one that sounds the best with your guitar. Like, why wouldn't you?
Right.
Right? Like that's what it's all about.
As a drummer, especially, I can't get that close to that much outboard gear, right. Just geographically. Like, it doesn't work for me.
And you're
to
like
be able
right
to,
here next to your shit.
I can't. Yeah. You know, I can't engineer and play, but now that I can do it from my keyboard and I've got a separate mouse and screen set up next to my kit, I can actually engineer and play at the same time. What are some of the things that you wish you could have been way better at, or more dialed in, or more understanding about when you started, rather than having to get there the hard way?
Getting smaller with your part. Your part that you're creating probably doesn't need to be on all 6 strings.
Gotcha.
It's probably 3 strings, and maybe it's 2 strings. And 2 strings plus a bass note, or 3 strings plus a bass note, you're already getting to a place where you're taking up too much space. There's such a limited amount of space, and the illusion of a large part is created by having a grouping of strings together and then a string that's far away from it, and not having all the strings hitting at one time.
Right. Picking
your few strings that you're playing on and staying on those is super valuable for an acoustic session player.
And are there any things in terms of the psychological component of the politics and the scheduling and the time management and all of that stuff?
I think those things, time management and scheduling, are based on your age. When you're 25, you just work as much as you can.
Yeah.
Even maybe when you're 30, you work as much as you can. When you get to be 40, then you pick what time you can work. And like having a kid for me was like, it just made time prioritizing. I get so much more done now. You take the time that you have and you make the most of it, and you pick your work based on that. I know it's sort of like maybe frou-frou to say, but for me, what I decided was I'm intentionally going to put more energy towards songwriting and producing this year. And by just saying that, by just sort of like forecasting that, I got less calls. When I decided several years ago, like, okay, I'm really going to push into this, I got a lot more calls. And then I did a lot of work during the pandemic because I have a studio.
Right.
You know, we all played on a lot of recordings. The psychology part of it, yeah, when you're in your 20s, you'll work as much as you can, but you might not be as confident and might not be as comfortable in your chair. The most important thing would be make sure you're breathing when you're recording.
Do you have a problem with that?
Well, being conscious of my body is something that I haven't always been in the chair.
Right.
And it's so important because you have to breathe quietly in the acoustic chair. So lots of times I'll find like, oh, wait, I didn't breathe. And like, wait, why am I in pain? I haven't been breathing enough.
I never thought about that being an issue.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Like, you know, or holding tension. if you're holding tension anywhere in your body, as
Yes.
in the
Now
acoustic
that I can
chair,
relate to. Yes.
yeah. So it's a similar thing. Like when you're tense, you're not breathing really, you know. When you're breathing, you'll be holding less tight and you'll squeak less. You know, the whole thing about squeaks is just the amount of pressure as you're moving between chords. You know, and then for me, it's like, okay, then how do I avoid having to do that? That like to go back to like, what's the simplest thing to create the clearest sound? It's like you're just trying to avoid as much of this movement as possible.
Right. I want to just believe that breathing is what we need to do to fix everything.
Yeah, it is.
Can we just do that? Can we just?
I mean, a lot would be solved if we all just took a deep breath.
It certainly would be a lot better. Thank you so much for coming.
It was a pleasure.